Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Kasper.
I want to talk a little bit about Matt Schneidman's piece up here from The Athletic that was just posted earlier this morning. He's got 7 Packers players with the most, or I should say 7 players facing pivotal seasons. Packers with the most to prove. Let's see if we agree or disagree with some of our picks. So I'm not going to read the article. I'll just go through the players. Lucas Van Ness. Okay, I think that's probably, if he's not number 1, he's probably towards the top of the list for a lot of us. He's on my list of players to prove entering year 3. So that one, that's an easy pick. I don't think there's much disagreements with that one. Luke Musgrave, tight end. Okay, I can see that. You know, a lot of the talk, a lot of the focus has been on Tucker Kraft. You know, last year, entering this offseason, how do we get Tucker Kraft more targets? How do we get him more involved consistently in the offense? But you look at Luke Musgrave, who was a second-round pick just a couple years ago, too. He's got some intriguing traits, tall, fast. You would think that would be a weapon that you would want to utilize within this offense. So, yeah, I could buy that. I could buy him as a guy entering year 3, a pivotal season. Is he going to see an increase in his role? Definitely. Keyshawn Nixon. No, if he wants to be that number 1 corner, you know, we'll see on the Jair Alexander front how that's all going to transpire. But for a guy, you know, after last season, talking about wanting to be a number 1 guy, wanting to be the number 1 corner, can he be that guy? Can he back the talk? I could see that. I could buy that. Especially if there is no Jair this year. Keyshawn Nixon, yeah, he's entering a pivotal year and potentially a year where maybe he can make a little bit more coin. Jordan Love, yeah, I can see that too. His first year as a starter, started off a little slow, finished fantastic, got a nice big contract. Last year, begins the season banged up. You wonder how much of that affected his play. Wasn't awful. I think a lot of people just assumed he was awful last year, but you put it in perspective and you look at the bigger picture and the overall picture of everything. And Jordan Love was still a pretty darn solid quarterback. But it's also fair to say there were some inconsistencies. And there were some struggles. And you wonder how much did the groin injuries, did the knee injuries affect his play last year? So I think entering his 3rd year as a starter, you're looking for that consistency now. That to me is the biggest thing. You know, especially when you look back at his first year a couple years ago as a starter. The slow start and then the amazing finish. You look at, okay, can you put that together for a full season consistently? Didn't get to see that last year. Again, was it because of the injuries? Was it the knee injury? Was it the groin injury that affected him? If he's healthy, if he can stay healthy, fingers crossed, for this whole season, are we going to see him consistently play at a high level? Kenny Clark, yeah, I would agree with that one too. Because I think this is a huge year for Kenny Clark in terms of maybe his future with the green and gold. Last year, before the season starts, he signs that contract. 3-year, $64 million deal. He got paid. And switching to a 4-3 defense last year, I, like many, thought this was going to be a defense that would benefit Kenny Clark. And it didn't. Wasn't that great. He struggled. Again, consistency. And I look at this year, if he has a poor year again, he could be on his way out. Because 2026, after this season, Kenny Clark has a cap hit of about $31.4 million. That is a huge, monstrous cap hit. And his dead cap, it's still pretty big, but it's like half of that. It's almost half of that. It's $17 million dead cap. So if Kenny Clark has a similar year to last year, it would not surprise me one bit that the Packers say, yeah, instead of taking a $31.4 million cap hit, we're going to move on, and if it's a post-June 1st, we could split up that dead cap hit amongst 2 years in that, especially considering their cap situation for next year, and we're just, we're going to move on from that. Kenny Clark can make that conversation a little bit more difficult if he goes out there and balls out this year and has a fantastic season. Marshawn Lloyd is also on this list from Matt. This one I'm like, okay. I mean, I understand why he would be on here. He's entering his second year. We didn't get to see him a lot last year because of injuries. So, I mean, that was the main reason. And, Josh Jacobs just being what Josh Jacobs did last year. But Marshawn Lloyd was hurt early on in the offseason, early on in the spring preseason, and then in the regular season. So we didn't get to see him. So he's entering his second year here. I don't know if I would say it's a pivotal year, though, for Marshawn Lloyd. I almost feel like this is it's essentially his rookie year. So I don't know if I'm ready to say pivotal. I understand the argument, but I don't know if I'm on that side. I would argue that I think Jordan Morgan is entering more of a pivotal year than Marshawn Lloyd. Jordan Morgan being the first-round pick from last year. And yes, he also was dealing with some injuries, very similar to Marshawn Lloyd, missed a ton of time. But Jordan Morgan being a first-round pick compared to Lloyd, a third-round pick, Lloyd is not going to be a starter this year. Josh Jacobs is going to be the starter. Jordan Morgan is in contention to be a starter this year. They're giving him a shot, whether it's going to be at left tackle or whether it's going to be at an interior guard position. And being a first-round pick, there's that expectation to be a starter. So Morgan is not on this list. I would put Morgan ahead of Marshawn Lloyd on my list. Like, okay, we want to see this first year, or we want to see this first-round pick develop into that starter in his second year. Whether it is he the future left tackle? Is he better suited at interior guard? That, to me, I would put him above Lloyd. Jaden Reed is also on this list, and that's the final seventh player on here. Again, I understand it, and to an extent I would agree with it, because you look at Jaden Reed's last year, statistically, numbers-wise, receiving yards, okay, up there, leading the team, but he also dropped double-digit passes last year. You got to see that cleaned up. Now, we have time and time again have seen sophomore receivers in Green Bay kind of go through a little bit of a dip in their sophomore year, in their second year. Devontae Adams being the prime example of this, where everybody wanted the Packers to move on from Devontae after his second year. So hopefully history kind of repeats itself, not only for Jaden Reed, but for maybe a Dontavian Wicks. Like, I would argue Dontavian Wicks maybe should be on this list too, because all we've heard about Dontavian Wicks, especially last year, you look at the advanced statistics, there are the numbers. This guy is one of the top receivers in all of the National Football League in terms of separation off the line of scrimmage. His footwork, his moves to get open is fantastic, and it reminds a lot of people of Devontae. But he dealt with a lot of drops last year too. So if they're still high on him, potentially being that a top receiver on his team, I'd throw him on this list too, along with Jaden Reed. But I get the Jaden Reed one because it goes back to that conversation of a number one wide receiver. Is Jaden Reed that number one wide receiver? They drafted Matthew Golden in the first round. Jaden Reed is a guy that has got to be utilized. Again, I'm going to use the word consistency, and that's a big thing with a lot of these guys. Jaden Reed's got to be utilized consistently within this offense, but he's also got to produce consistently, not dropping the amount of passes that he did last year. But they've got to be able to get him the ball, because once he has it, look at that Philly game in week 1, how they used him. Using him in space, using him, in different formations to get open and making big plays. That's what I want to see from Jaden Reed this year. Another guy I would add to this list, though, I was a little surprised he's not. Actually, I would add a couple guys on here. Rashawn Gary, I would add. I think Rashawn Gary is entering a pivotal year, too, because Again, and second year within this new defense. I think this is a year for Rashawn Gary to show that he can play in a 4-3, or is he just better suited as a stand-up 3-4 outside linebacker? You know, you look at the contract situation. There is a potential out after this year, but it's better suited maybe after 2026 because his 2026 cap number, his cap hits $28 million, but he's got a dead cap of 17. Yes, that would create an instant savings of $11 million, maybe even a little bit more again if you do the post-June 1st cut. But in 2027, he's got a $31 million cap hit and then just a dead cap hit of 8.5. So you're talking about maybe a year or two left of Rashawn Gary in Green Bay, in my opinion. And kind of with similar reasons to Kenny Clark, Rashawn Gary can make that decision a lot more difficult if he goes out there and balls out this year. And the fact that Green Bay did not invest heavily in edge rushers, defensive ends, whether it was the draft, whether it was free agency or the trade market at this point, that does put more on Lucas Van Ness. That does put more on Rashawn Gary to be producers, to get after the quarterback. So I would put Rashawn Gary on this list of guys that entering this season have a lot to prove. I would also put Quay Walker on this list. Now, I feel like he's probably going to get a contract extension before the season starts. That feels like that's what Green Bay does. My question would be, if you're Quay Walker's representatives, are you telling Quay to play out this year and go ball out so that contract gets higher? Or do you take the security? Quay Walker, again, I know it's the word of the day, consistency. What has his career been defined by? Lack of consistency. We've seen moments of really good play of Quay Walker, but at most, 2-week stretches, like 2 weeks in a row, we've seen him play at a really high level, and then it's like, where's Quay? So I would argue that Quay Walker should be on this list too, because we've seen it now for 3 years of Quay. First year, racked up the tackles, had issues of being thrown out of a game, being just boneheaded stuff. He's cleaned that up, but now it's like the consistency play. I mean, I go back to what was it last year's Bears game or the year before, where there was a couple plays like, dude, just hit the hole. And he could have had some big plays, tackles for losses, sacks. But it's like at times he gets caught thinking a little too much instead of playing, just going out there and play. So I want to see that progression. I want to see that continue. I want to see that develop more for Quay Walker. Got to see that. So those are just some of the players. I mean, we could probably nitpick a lot of these other guys, right? I mean, we could, is it a Sean Ryan? If you really want to go deep into the hole, you'd say, hey, Sean Ryan's entering a pivotal year because if he gets a starting job and he balls out, maybe that makes, for him personally, might make him a richer man, but makes things a little bit more interesting for Green Bay in terms of how they keep that offensive line group together. I would even throw kind of a wild card one into this. Now hear me out on this one, okay? I would throw maybe a little bit of Aaron Banks into this. The free agent offensive lineman. Because there's a lot of times like, is it kind of the way his contract was structured a little bit? Was it a 1 year type of thing? Now, according to Spot Track, he's going to have a cap hit in 2026 of about $24.9 million, and he still has a dead cap hit of 20.3. So, I mean, there's not much of a savings there. But it's 2027 where maybe there's that better out. But there was some speculations like, okay, because let's face it, the dude got paid 4 years, $77 million. That ain't chump change. He got paid. So I think there's a sense of, and that kind of surprised a lot of people. It's like, oh, Aaron Banks got that amount of money. Wow, that surprised a lot of people. So I'd say he's entering this year as like, prove it. Prove it that you're worth it. Prove it that wasn't an overpay by Green Bay. Those are some of the names I would add to the list. My personal list.